GPS will route you around through a couple of shortcuts.
Really?
A couple corners off of 29 to get down to 58.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta feel a little lost sometimes.
Oh,
when you take
yeah,
that.
yeah, I've done that. Where do you turn? Where's the turn off?
Yeah, I mean,
Colorado Mountain?
yeah, somewhere down in there.
That's what I'm doing anyway.
You can,
Winterizing the pumps.
yeah.
Already?
Oh yeah, a lot of people are. Well, if you don't got a heater on it, the water's gotten pretty cold.
Where, your cabin or?
Oh, no.
Pools.
Pools.
Pool, all right, I'm getting ready to learn about that at some point.
Well,
Gotta
they're
pull
kind
the
of
trigger on one.
they're kind of like boats.
Oh, good. That's
Yeah.
great. So it's better to have a friend with them?
Yeah.
Who's gonna put your pool in?
I think it's national.
Oh yeah, they're probably like that.
Pools there, they sell to national.
No, they put them in.
Okay.
They don't
They-
do Gyp Creek. They don't do.
Yeah, well, some of those new places over in Lynchburg, they've done some pools over there in the apartment buildings that have been built along Timberlake. And
Okay.
Meeting of the Amherst County Service Authority to order. First thing on the agenda is any citizen comment. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Board, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
so moved.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll vote aye. All right, next thing is approval of the minutes. Let's take up August 2nd, 2022 first. Is there any additions or corrections?
No, I don't think so. I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Of August 2nd, okay.
Yes, sir.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll vote.
Y'all sleeping?
Mr. Farrow,
I'm gonna abstain.
abstain? Okay.
Abstain.
All right, very good. All right, meeting minutes of August the 15th. Any additions or corrections?
None. I'll go ahead and make a motion, we approve the minutes for 8/15/2022.
All right. Motion on the floor by Mr. Pugh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's the rest of you.
Who else was here? I know some of y'all here on.
I abstain. Didn't even know we had a meeting on I missed the second, so I didn't know we had a meeting on the 15th.
All right.
I don't remember. That's bad, I don't remember.
Present, Tom Martin, Turner Perro, David Pugh, Wesley Wood, and Drew Wade.
Oh.
All of us.
Okay.
So it's
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Woods?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Wade, you voted aye?
I'll abstain on this one myself.
Okay.
I don't recall this.
All right. Next thing on the agenda is the July 2022 financial report. Mr.
So the
Hall.
first thing I'd like to mention is that Mr. Hopkins is out of town and was not able to make this meeting. So for the July financial report, if we could skip right to page 47 of the agenda and look in the far right-hand column, in a nutshell, it says that we are 4.82% in the black for our operating revenue from 2021 to 2022, which is a good thing. We've had 6 new water services in July, and we had 0 wastewater service new connections in July. Just not considering the non-operational revenue that was collected the previous year, we're in pretty good shape. There is one correction I would say on page 46, which also says 202. In the summary, there is a typo where it says minus 0.62% for year-to-date 2022 compared to the same period in 2021, and that is for July water sales.
Okay, I don't think we have the same page numbers that you do.
It's showing the same on mine. Summary, item 6 at the top, July water
Oh, I
sales.
thought it said page 46, I'm sorry, summary, yep.
Well, at the bottom, it also has 46 on mine.
Yeah, mine says the same.
Mine says 2 of 2, okay. All right, any questions for Mr. Hall? All right, if not, we'll move on to the executive director's report.
Since Mr. Hopkins is not here, I'll roll through these pretty quick, but some good news is that he reports that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit for the James River Bank stabilization has been issued. He's waiting for some other things to come in, and he's also, it looks like we may get the funding that he has applied for after a meeting with Senator Warner's staff. Hopefully. Unless any further erosion accelerates, he plans to delay the construction until we get the funding. For the water and sewer rehabilitation, I'm not sure you want to go through all these, but he says that you can read just like me, the Woodview Drive water main replacement has been delayed. The sanitary sewer extension program for Lakeview Drive, he's got one, it looks like one of our citizens were waiting on an easement for that. He's saying he's got all but one to be able to proceed with the project, so hopefully we get that soon. Sewage lift station upgrades, we've done some work on Dillard Road. We're finishing a review of some calls from Hurt Profit for the Riker Road. I think we're looking at actually 3 lift stations that we want to do some work on to repair some of the aging infrastructure in there. We also had an issue that happened recently with a mobile home that was being transported on Right Shop Road, which snagged an overhead line and broke a power pole, and we're going to talk more about that when we get to the assistant director report. But Bob has it listed in his. We're going to get reimbursed by the insurance company, and we were able to get that power restored back very fast. BC Mobile Home Park, we've had a few reimbursements that have come in. To date, we're not quite at $100,000 for construction that's been completed. We did find when we excavated for the tie-in for the CDTC connection on campus roads that the water line that was listed, let me start talking to this here. The water line that was listed as an 8-inch for the tie-in point was actually a 6-inch, which would create a bottleneck for us to come with a 12-inch line down to a 6 and then back up to an 8. So we were able to get approval from the state to go another 500 feet or so into the campus and make a connection further down where there is an 8-inch line in the loop. So it looks like we're gonna have plenty of funding for that. He's waiting on Hurt Profit, I guess, to do some more preliminary work to give us an estimate of what that's gonna cost to proceed. Grand Creek Reservoir Dam Improvement Projects. There's some photos attached to this report that shows progression to date. Bob has actually applied for another DCR grant for $2250. That was for actual reimbursement for a tabletop exercise that we had with Hurt Profit a while back. What to do if we had a flood or dam safety. Looks like Westville Court sewer extensions. He's keeping in touch with the developer. However, it says that the developer has requested that we proceed with the originally planned sewer extension along the north end of the property, which is going to cost a lot more than if we do whatever changes Bob was talking sanitary sewer extension. I know that's a big subject for us. It says here that Mr. Hopkins is planning on presenting a cost estimate at the 9/20 supervisors meeting. So he must be planning on getting here for the second meeting this afternoon. The Monacan Indian projects, the project up at, on Dixie Airport Road, I know that they were able to get the water line actually tapped onto that and extend it up as far as they can go at this point. We're waiting on them to install the vault for us to bring the water line up to provide a meter connection for that site. There's also some issues they're having with sanitary sewer on that lot, and I think Bob's going to have to answer some questions for them. The Amherst Senior Citizen, again, that's tied to the Gateway Sanitary Sewer Extension Project. He plans on discussing once he gets here for the supervisor meeting. For the EDA Business Friendliness Initiatives, I'm going to talk about our website and the progress we've made with that in my report. And it says, I know that Bob presented to you guys some water line extension projects, and you all have asked for pricing on those. I know that's on his list of things to do. I think that's basically what he's saying in his report. There's also a low-income water assistance program we've been talking about for a while. The final draft vendor agreement has been received and reviewed by Mr. Hopkins and the county attorney. And he says he plans to present this in October.
Can we go back to the Seminole Plaza Shopping Center? This is a hoped-for DEQ funding of a sewer system replacement. Did not work out. Another overflow was reported in late March. I mean, we've been dealing with this since I've been on the service authority. I mean, how much longer are we going to keep dealing with it before we litigate it?
Well, unfortunately, since we don't own it, it's not ours. It's a tough situation to be in.
Who should be doing it? Should it be us? Should it be DEQ? I mean, who should be going after the overflows?
Well, the one with the teeth, and I would say that would be DEQ. They have the ability to go in and take care of whatever needs to be done. They can enforce, they could be an enforcement in this to try to get it done. I know that we've worked with DEQ, we worked with the health department. Bob has talked to the owner, there's been lawyers involved. I don't really know the answer to that. But in my mind, and in my experience, this is something that DEQ can do.
Mr.
What
Perry?
are the,
Who's liable?
The owner, which would be the shops.
What's our role?
What happens is, if there's an overflow in an area that nobody's claiming responsibility, somebody has to take responsibility for it. And we've actually went in and cleared the lines.
So we're assuming responsibility for it?
That's been done in the past, but Mr. Hopkins has been trying desperately to get the owner to assume responsibility, and there's always been pushback. They want somebody else to take care of it.
Did us assuming responsibility put us in a compromised position?
I
That
don't
may be a
think so.
question for,
I think,
Mr.
to me,
Longley.
it's like this, if there's we're the protectors of the water.
I agree with that.
So if we have an overflow or illicit discharge potentially into the creek, somebody's got to take action for that. We've taken a position to assume responsibility at that point.
are we billing the owner?
Exactly.
Well, why don't, maybe this would be an appropriate discussion in closed session at the next meeting to discuss our legal options.
I agree. Could you ask Mr. Hopkins to have more information for this and be prepared to discuss it,
I will.
possibly in a closed session? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the...
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
To this? We discussed previously the possibility of doing a master plan and start formulating the RFP for that. I'd like an update on that, please. I know you don't have that now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, all right, I'll give that. Thank you. That's Mr. Hopkins.
Yes, thank you. Thanks.
Oh, I just lost my Wi-Fi, but I believe the next thing is Assistant Director's Report.
electronic billing out to our customers on email to try to get away from some of the old postcard billings that we've always done historically. And that's a new thing for our area. We actually have 2,773 of our customers that are participating, which is a surprisingly good number. I know that some of those are coming back to us and saying, you know, I still want to get my bill in the mail. But we're hoping this is going to overcome some of the inconsistencies listed in our bullets. We've got a lot of bills that are sent to the wrong addresses, folks calling and saying we never got our bill. And that's a post office issue that we're having. Hoping that's going to reduce customer late fees because electronic is instant. And when they go online and they pay instantly electronically, so like that. Reduce our disconnects, reduce penalties associated with the disconnects, and reduce our postal costs overall.
I got a question there. We didn't happen to inadvertently sign people up for electronic billing by accident, did we? Because I know several people that didn't get their bill this last cycle,
So,
so.
when we first started it, we had an issue with our firewall and the person that handles our email server. So there was a glitch in the system. For that reason, anybody who's received email bills for the months of August and September were not enforcing any kind of penalties.
Okay.
Cutoff date, penalty date, we're actually resending the bills out and communicating with the customer, trying to give them an opportunity to pay.
Okay.
With anything, anytime you do something different, there's change, there's always going to be a hiccup. But we feel pretty good moving forward. I think we've got a good start.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a really good step, and I'd like to see us move further, potentially to an AMI system, which is there's AMA and an AMI. Automated, it's basically automated meter reading where you put basically an antenna on a water tower, and it reads the meters instantaneously, basically. So if somebody has a water leak, it can flag your system. You can let somebody know they have a water leak before waiting 30 days and letting them know that they have a water leak or a running toilet. So it's a good service there. But it also allows you to bill consistently on a monthly basis and transition some of the people that may be doing meter reading into other roles where operations and maintenance and keeping up with what we're doing. I think it'd be a nice thing. It's a long-term investment that takes time to implement. And you do it with a meter replacement cycle, basically. But I'd love to talk more about that later.
Okay, thank you. I'm still following up with our website that we launched back in March. And the website seems to be a success. I know we need to maintain it. There's going to be some changes that need to be made eventually. But we continue to see an increase in traffic on our site. For this month, the Google Analytics report says that the website is, since we launched our website, we've had 2,155 users on our website. When we first started, I had something like 43 or something. So it's beginning to work better. Of course, 28% of that have been folks who use it to pay my bill, and especially with the electronic billings going out, hopefully this number will go up. Well, just following up on the lead and copper rule, I know when I wasn't able to be at the last meeting when our student intern engineer was here, and he did a great job of researching that project. And as it turns out, about 74% of our residential accounts are connected to structures that are constructed prior to 1989, which is a flag that there could be lead in the system. And as of our commercial accounts, about 77%. So we got a lot of work to do on that. Waiting on further instructions on how we're exactly supposed to go, proceed with that as far as the inventory is concerned. There's a lot of discussions about potholing and how many potholes. There's a lot of liability and interest on our end as far as mandating that we go on private property and do a copy of their property to see what type it is in the ground. So telling us there's a lot of funding that's going to be available, so I'm just waiting on the right opportunity to be able to make an application for that and to see what the process is going to be. If any of you all that are engineers that are familiar with this and have any information to share with me, I'm looking for it. If you can't seem to get any information, I'll
not much out there right now.
So this was on the Wrightwood Road Sewer Pump Station on August 23rd. It was determined about 9:40 a.m. a mobile home was being transported on Rice Shop Road when an overhead power line snagged it. I actually received a call at 11:35 a.m. from AEP once they determined that the overhead line fed solely to our Wrightwood Road pump station, or pump station number 2. So we immediately put into place our emergency response plan. We met on the site with AEP and evaluated the conditions in which they determined the site was safe. It actually broke a power pole in half, and it actually snagged the line feeding our pump power pole, and actually pulled the meter can off of the pole, pulled the feeder conductors out of our pump control can. That's the force that came from it. But immediately, our crew went into action, and this is a wet well that has a high turnover, or pump duty, if you will. So it's not something we could set on. It's not like the next day would be okay. We would be looking at possibly an illicit discharge. So they immediately went into action and had it installed by the end of the shift. We talked to our electrician that's in our emergency response plan. Within a couple of hours, they had qualified folks on site discussing with AEP a timeline to put the materials together. We were actually pumping sewage by the end of the shift that day. But by the next day, around about 1:30 p.m., AEP, actually our electrician was ready for AEP to make final connections back to the pump station. So we were able to pump the next day within 26 hours after this happened. And I think it was really impressive to see. This was nothing to take a lot of. This was a lot of work. The pole had to be set, lineman work had to be done, electrician work, and then our crew.
Did you have an overflow?
We did not.
Congratulations, excellent work.
That's the good thing. Congratulations to the crew, because they jumped at it very quickly. Also, after we started up, we were able to lift through with just one pump. We found out that one of the starters inside of the pump control cabinet actually was damaged by the force of the wire being pulled out. And so we used one pump. On August the 30th, we got the part came in to replace the starter. Then we found out there was a blockage in the pump. Apparently it was right in the middle of a cycle and something got hung up in it. So the crew went out and removed the blockage into the pump. And so all systems were back to normal operations by August the 30th. I've gotten all the information from the insurance carrier, the responsible party. I've been in contact with them. We're just waiting for one more invoice to come in to send our cost over to them to be reimbursed.
Appreciate the quick response.
Congratulations to the ACSA staff and AEP and JB Moore for quickly responding, ensuring safe, continuous operations. It was a fantastic display of professionalism.
Very good.
So the next one's a big topic. That's the availability piece. Last meeting you guys had, I wasn't at, I read the meeting minutes from it. I know that the goal of that meeting was, and I'm quoting from the meeting minutes, it says, assess availability fees on meter size and try to stay competitive with Bedford County and Lynchburg. Okay? So Mr. Hopkins assigned for me to work directly with Mr. Turner-Ferro with that as a consultant who knows this. This is not something I've ever been involved with before, so I really appreciate the guidance. We were able to work on this, and the process for getting what you're asking for, according to my studies with the American Water Works Association, could be called a meter size ERU calculation approach, which the purpose of an ERU, which is an equivalent residential unit, is to standardize the customer base for fees, given that a commercial customer has different consumptions than residential customers. To do this, there were a few pieces of the, let's see, to put together the stew, we had a few ingredients. One was to have our ACSA depreciable capital assets, or our assets being depleted net. I will tell you the number that I have in the green cell here is actually from our most current audit. I don't think it's been published yet, but Edwards and Jones was kind enough to share with me that number from our 2021 year-end audit. We also had to have our meter sizes and our inventory from our financial system, and we used equivalency ratios that are provided by the American Water Works Association. To quickly explain that, a residential meter would be a unit of 1. That's a 5/8 and 3/4, and it's common for utility systems to use 5/8 and 3/4 as a unit of 1. And in our system, mostly, our standard is 5/8. We do have some 3/4 meters, like in the Woods Lake Road area from some new projects. So that's why they're clumped together as a 1. But a 1-inch meter, having a design flow capacity greater than just a residential meter, has an equivalency ratio of 2.5 times. And an 1.5 meter has 1.5 times. And so that's how the ratios work. These came directly out of a table from AWWA manual that we ordered. I have it referenced as an M1 manual, but we actually ordered an M54 that has the same table in it. So what we tried to find was what is actually our number of equivalent residential units in our water system. And so by taking the meter inventories and the quantities and expanding them out by the ratios, we were able to come up with the actual water equivalent residential units. Now, unfortunately, our audit does not break down water and wastewater. So our ACSA depreciable capital assets net is actually water and wastewater combined. So for that reason, there had to be some additional math to determine what our wastewater RUs are for a total combined system equivalent residential unit, which we came up at 7178. Excuse me, we came up with actual 8824 with water and wastewater combined. That number, actually our depreciable capital assets is divided by the number 8824 to come up with a value for each meter, or each account for water and wastewater, which is actually 3313.80 rounded up to 3315. So one of the things that I think we found that was kind of neat with that is the fact that we currently charge $3,000 for a residential availability fee for water and $4,500 for a wastewater residential availability fee. Those combined is $7,500, and if we take an average of those, it actually comes to $3,750 versus $3,315 that we calculated, which is a $435 net difference, but it seems like we're in the ballpark. That's kind of what we kind of discovered doing that. So from that number, 3 options are provided to the board. But before I talk about that, I wanted to also talk about something listed in the county code. We've been talking availability fees for a lot of years. That's historical. And in all the reading across the internet for the other utility companies and the manual from the AWWA, I see impact fees, capacity fees, capital recovery fees, but we feel like maybe system development fee may be a better choice of wording in the county code. And so that's listed as a consideration for the board when you look at the options we provided. Option number 1 was actually taking that equivalent residential unit number and applying it to water and wastewater, since our calculation had water and wastewater combined. That option doesn't seem, well, first of all, our largest, as you saw back in the inventory, our largest customer is our residential community, 6,616 meters versus the others. In that particular case, what we're doing is we're increasing the burden on any potential residential customer that may be connecting to our system out in a rural area where wastewater is not available. So we're already at $3,000, we're going to be taking it up to $3,315. Sewer didn't appear to, at $3,315, I'm not sure that sewer is going to meet the requirement for our cost for a system development fee for past and future connections. Option number 2, looking at what was determined in option number 1, if we went back to our $3,000 value for our residential connection that we currently have, it's approved in our we take the 3315 and add it back to the sewer, we could have said 3630, but we placed it at $3,600. Again, that takes us to a closer value on our water availability fees or our system development fee, but we may still be underscoring what's required for our sewer. But the last one, considering the fact that we're so close in our calculations and we already have approved in the county code of the fees of $3,000 and $4,500, we applied those to the equivalent residential unit rate and expanded those out. And it's kind of interesting how it turned out. On the last page, there is a comparison chart of Bedford County's fees that's on the internet versus what option number 3 is. And it shows that we're significantly low for our residential meters and all the smaller meters, by 31% if you look at it combined water and wastewater. But as we get larger, it closes the gap, which is rather interesting. And the 1 meter I know that's it's been the hot topic is the 4-inch meter for the hotel development. For combined water and wastewater, the value is $204,700 for Bedford, but for us, we're looking at a value of $187,500 for a 4-inch meter, which is 8% less than them. And in the last board meeting, it was brought up by a consultant that the city of Lynchburg for a 4-inch meter would run at $186,000. So that puts us a little above Lynchburg and below Bedford, which is nestled really nicely into that competitive range that you all know.
Can you, or somebody on the board, refresh my memory, what it was at with the current rates?
The first calculation that was determined was around $660,000, I think it was $660,000,
Okay,
using our current.
that's what I thought. I thought it was up around 700, so I think this is in the right direction, so.
Excuse me.
Turner, is that, in a nutshell,
I think that's a very detailed description, and thank you for doing that. One point of clarification, I am a consultant, but you and I were working together in the capacity as a board member, and that was not as a consultant. But good news came out of this. We truth tested our numbers, and the numbers, when we were talking, we didn't know where these numbers were coming from, but we were able to pull it back to assessed value. Granted, that's a lagging indicator because everything cost less 20 years ago than it did now, and that's a depreciated value. So basically, if you're buying if you're putting a connection on the house, you're paying in and buying, round numbers, 1/8,000th worth of the system. Because we've got 8,000 round numbers of equivalent residential units. You put a house, you buy into 1/8,000th of it. So when you are if you look at the chart, if you're putting in a 4-inch meter, what's the equivalent residential for 4-inch? 25? 25, so you're buying 25 8,000ths into the system. So that's how that would work. This is not a perfect system. It is something that can be easily quantifiable to a developer reading the code, but it gets a little murky when you get into bigger diameter meters. If you get a 6-inch meter, people can cheat and try to squeeze a 4-inch meter in because of the bands, and Bob has mentioned this before, the bands which they will serve are so wide. But what's our biggest meter in the system right now?
3-inch, I believe.
So we don't see this as being a problem for us in the near future, or in my opinion, it's not a problem for us in the near future, and it's something we can modify and tweak as we go forward. I like option number 3. I would like the board to discuss what they would like to do. Option number 2 would be to incentivize additional sewer installation, so you're discounting the market. We're getting what it appears to be a fair value, but we're discounting the market. Option number 3 is more of a market pricing, but we can go back and we can justify where that number came from because it all ties back to what does it cost per connection. So we're not just grabbing a number out of the air. We're using that base number and then setting a market rate. And you can see, I think that last chart gives you a nice comparison to show kind of where we fall. And I think that would be my suggestion, but as this board is comprised of members of the Board of Supervisors, you have a better understanding of what you would like to incentivize, where you'd like growth to if you would like to incentivize growth, and maybe you'd prefer to have the lower range. Honestly, I don't know how much of an incentive it's going to be. I think somebody's going to build a building, but I'd be very curious as to what you all think.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I'm fine with option 3. I think that you're quite a bit lower than Bedford County at this point. You're in the ballpark with Lynchburg. It's a lot lower than what it had been. I think it'll incentivize, it's fine with me. I think option 3 would be good for the board moving forward.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with option 3. I think it's a good starting spot, and if we have to come back to the table and reevaluate later, we can do that. So,
Mr. Wood?
I agree, option 3 looks like our best option, and I don't think we're gonna have to worry about the larger meter size, and if we have that kind of demand, I think that's a good discussion that we can address at that time if we have a user of a 6-inch meter.
Okay. So, Mr. Hall, okay, so on residential, if I was to build a house today in Madison Heights and connect it to water and sewer, what would my fees be?
Are you gonna be $3,000 for water, $4,500 for sewer? There's also a connection fee of $1,500.
Okay, so under option 3, we would be cheaper than we are today, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
I thought it was going to be about the same.
it
It would be
remains the
exactly
same.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, we haven't changed what's already been adopted in the county.
And that number, I believe, increased just recently in the past year or so.
Okay.
So we'd hold it.
So let's say we do this is what I'm mainly interested in, is once this money is paid, where does it go? Because if it's going into expanding, maintaining the system, I think that's a good thing, right? That's a budgeting thing. But if it's going into operating cost, I don't necessarily agree with that. So how do we ensure that these fees are going to actually replace the aging system, expand the system, that kind of stuff?
So that, we've had that discussion and and you're correct. These fees are not for operating costs. We've already established our operating costs with the budget we approved. So we should not have those in there. But I'm not so sure right now. Well, you can help me.
They are included in your operating.
Can you-
I was getting ready to say that.
Yeah, you're using
They
it
should.
for operations.
So what I was trying to say is, they should not be, but currently everything goes into one pot, as I understand. So, that's something that we as a community water system, need to look at moving forward. There's another thing to think about too. When the audit that we had in 2020 was complete, that capital asset being depreciated was almost it was over $500,000 less than what was done for 2021. So not only are we looking at this today, but this is something we got to keep our eye on because it's going to change.
And remind me, how much funding have we brought in so far this year? I know that's probably in the financial report, right?
What do you mean by funding?
How much of these fees have we taken in this year?
Availability fees, connection fees, is that what you're speaking of?
And I would think that the availability fees, which we would like to call the system development fees going forward, that's a capital fee, and that should be, if we could set up in the future a kind of a capital reserve in the budget and have that, or some mechanism that somebody that knows the financial system better than I do would recommend. But reserve those, just like Mr. Martin was saying. But the connection fee, that's an operational cost, because that's the labor to do the install.
Okay, so to answer your question.
In my-
Availability fees for water, we've collected year-to-date $86,725, and availability fees for wastewater is $40,090, according to the financial report.
Year to date.
Year-to-date.
That's roughly 126,000. Let's just call it 150 for the year, all right? So if we memorialize this, what I'm hearing is there'll be a $150,000 hole in your operating budget next year, thereabouts. right?
I don't see that, because we're asking you for to approve of an operating budget according to line items. And this is not something that you would bring them to the table for a budget that you don't know that you're going to get.
I also think there's some capital asset replacements that are currently in the operating budget that should be allocated to a capital budget, pump replacements and so forth.
So I guess where I'm at is I'm fine with option 3. I would like for us to memorialize moving forward that this funding will be set aside purely for capital expenses. And how do we do that?
Could I offer maybe two, well, how about this? I would suggest that maybe there's a motion that in the next for the next fiscal year, to have a dedicated capital fund to which these fees would be allocated.
And I'm fine with that, but I certainly would like to have Mr. Hopkins involved in that discussion. I don't want to make that decision right now. I think he should be involved in it because he oversees the budget. And so at this point, I think we need to wait and have that discussion maybe next month or.
That's reasonable.
Okay.
But, so what I was thinking, for this work, we could make a motion to direct, or by consensus, we could ask that the language be drawn up to support the code modifications per our discussion, with option 3, with the system development fee defined, and ask for council to do that. That would then come back through our board for approval and recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for adoption.
Can we ask Mr. Hopkins to be prepared to speak towards setting up a separate capital budget? And let's work towards that for next year?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you want to put that in the form of a motion?
It can, yes.
Uh,
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move that we direct the executive director to develop the ordinance language necessary for consideration at the next available board meeting for adoption.
Option 3.
Yes, pursuant to option 3 and the definitions that we requested. Is that clear, Mr. Lawler?
It is, thank you.
Okay, cool.
I got it.
All right, motion on the floor. But again, in doing that, I would like to have Mr. Hopkins discuss with us separating out a capital budget for improvements and maintenance to the system. Okay? All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Okay, made tract availability. Lost my thing.
All right, there's a tract of property off of Winesap Road that apparently our previous director, Mr. French, has eye on this for quite some time. Historically, ACSA has tried to acquire properties around the reservoir to protect our natural resource, protect our watershed. That's the only thing I don't know how it is. This one here particularly has an interest to us because it allows another access from the Winesap Road area over on the east side. That's a big 1.3-acre piece. With an operations manager this morning, actually going out and looking at the site. Apparently, we have a neighbor up there that allows us access to get to our to our fencing on that side of the reservoir. But this tract of land would allow us, basically, there's already a gated entrance off of Winesap. It's a small, narrow tract of land, would allow us on that side of the property. In addition to the other goals we're trying to achieve for protecting our reservoir and watershed. Also, with that, Mr. Hopkins has shared the tax assessment value at $23,400. The owners are interested in selling the tract for $30,000. Typically, in the past, we've only offered tax. Well, not. That's not going to be fun when we do our meeting minutes. I'll talk a little louder. How's that? Okay.
That's got a text from it.
All right, thank you. So typically in the past, we only offer someone what the tax value is, but in this case, this is more valuable to us because of the ability to be able to access this out of the reservoir for maintenance. And so we're asking, and it's 1.67 acres, so we're asking the board to authorize the ACSC Executive Director to proceed with the purchase of the reference property at this time.
What's the physical access to the May property? It doesn't appear to front Winesap Road. What's its physical and legal access?
With this tract of land you're speaking of?
Yes, the one where you're talking
I
about.
questioned that too. I didn't really get that far into, I just looked at it this morning. I did notice on some of the information provided, it says that right of way is private. There's also easement is dirt, so I'm not sure. There's gotta be some type of an easement into it, or else it would be landlocked, right?
Right, yeah, those are just generic comments made in the assessment records. So I think it is important for us to have access on that side. I've been on that property, and there's not good access from Winesap Road. I do think that we need to, and Mr. May is a well-known local surveyor. I'm sure he has some form of legal access, assuming he has.
Passed away.
Right. I knew him well. I would assume that he had some form of legal access to the property, but I think that we need to confirm the legal access to this particular tract to ensure that we're able to do what we need to do if we're moving forward with the purchase of it.
Well, could the purchase be contingent upon that?
It would absolutely need to be contingent
Yeah, I
on.
mean, we could technically make a motion that's contingent upon legal access to the property.
Well, I agree with that, but is it beneficial to us even if we don't have access to it for protecting the reservoir?
If we can't access it, how can someone else access it? I'm not sure what.
Exactly, but we keep people from accessing it,
Right.
and getting to the reservoir. Because I'm assuming what we want to do for the safety of the reservoir is to have a buffer around it, correct?
Yes. And if that's one of the other contingencies, if we don't purchase this property, then it puts it up for grabs for further development and potential drain fields, that type of thing.
Mr. May had developed that land. This is not a good map, but Mr. May had developed all of that land. I can't recall the name of the subdivision off of Winesap Road.
Meadowbrook? Is that-
Yes. So this might be a residue parcel from that development. I have a suspicion that's the case. I can't get to my internet. You see it on GIS?
Well, I think to me, I don't see it as being important for watershed protection in as much as it is for access to that side of the reservoir. Because of it's a long skinny piece of property. I think it's critical that you have an easement to Winesap Road. I would not object to entering into a contract with a due diligence period with some sort of contingency that we need to develop easement access. That would give us at least a contract to purchase the land and buy some time to develop an easement access if one doesn't already exist.
I'm not sure what this is.
So for me, this is more about access than it is about watershed protection.
Yeah,
Well, and to me, it's about both, but that's fine. If the majority of the service authority would like to do the due diligence and see if there's actually an easement to Winesap Road, that's fine. Mr. Lockaby, are we required to get appraisals done, or can we just go out and pay the asking price?
We're not required to do appraisals.
Okay. So what's your pleasure, board?
I think it's beneficial from an access standpoint if we can, I don't think it's beneficial from a protection standpoint. I would make a motion that we pursue purchase of property pursuant to having legal access to that property off of Winesap Road, or is it Meadowbrook Lane?
Ewers Lane, maybe?
Ewers
Come
Lane,
off here.
in order to
potentially.
provide access.
Can I suggest instead of saying pursuant to getting access, say.
Contingent on.
Yeah, or, contingent on getting access. I'd like to see a track at the same time.
Sure. Contingent on there being legal access to that property.
All right. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll vote aye. Mr. Hall, if you would, I would request that we receive a map showing which properties the Service Authority actually owns adjacent to the reservoir,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, next on is miscellaneous matters.
Well, a couple of things. First, we want to congratulate our ACSA staff that are moving on up by passing examinations that are required for their water treatment operators licenses. Recently, Berkeley Taylor, who is a water treatment operator Class 3, he just passed another examination and was recently promoted to water treatment operator Class 2. And we also had another staff member, Michael Tolgesi, who's an apprentice. He's passed his water treatment operator Class 4, and so he's been promoted to a Class 4 operator. So congratulations to them.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Just for the board's awareness, I got back just recently, last week, from the state water conference, water wastewater conference, and one of the complaints that VAMWA, which is the legal kind of, it's the association that promotes water and wastewater issues, is getting dialed into, is the difficulty of passing examinations. So when Mr. Hall's saying that our operators pass this is no little feat, and many operators are having trouble with this. So with sincere congratulations, because that's not an easy task.
Thank you. The next item on our list is, if you recall, back on July the 4th, there was an error in our operations at the water plant in which about 300 gallons of a coagulant entered Harris Creek. As part of our operations, it was a mistake, and I'm not sure if you all understand what happened that day. I know I sent an email out, but basically, we use a product that's called Delpac, and that product is manually applied to a couple of day tanks, and that's applied to our water as a part of a treatment process. It's a clumping agent to cause the, I don't want to get into too technical because I'm certainly not an operator. But what happened is basically, unattended, the valves allow the day tanks to overflow. They overflowed into a floor drain. The floor drain in that water plant has actually, it goes through a dechlor box, and then it eventually ends up into Harris Creek. And so before the operator discovered what was going on, about 300 gallons actually entered the creek. They did everything correctly. They stopped the issue from happening. They reported it to DEQ. I got a phone call on the 5th of July from DEQ. I think Mr. Hopkins was out at the time, out of the office, was not able to respond. And so they called my number as the assistant director to let us know that there had been a reported fish kill. And so immediately they sent their DEQ team out to look for the fish kill. They did find over 323 dead fish in Harris Creek. We have since received a notice of violation on August the 24th, which is in the agenda, letting us know what's taken place, what the future actions are, the fees, the penalties we were expected to pay, the reimbursement for the fish that were killed. We haven't really had any other correspondences from DEQ other than the 24th, but we did have a phone conference with Tim Fletcher, I think is the DEQ enforcement officer is, as a follow-up, and we sent him a picture copy of what we did in response to that. And one of the things that the team came up with is to have an overflow reservoir adjacent to those day tanks, so if the levels come up again, that goes into a reservoir or a catch basin, and the catch basin is a float. If the float rises because of an overflow that's taken place, then that will sound an audible alarm to let the team know that there's a problem. In addition to that, protocol has been changed. Now it takes 2 operators to do this instead of 1. That way there's 2 set of eyes on it.
that's involved in this process. And there's also a chart that they're required to sign off on indicating that the valves have been closed. So those are the steps we've taken so far. We sent that to DEQ, and we're waiting on a response for them on that. In addition, we've kind of asked about, when our operators run the numbers, looking at the safety data sheet for the Delpac, it appears that the dilution factor of the flowing creek is high enough that it may not have, it probably shouldn't have caused a fish kill. Whether it happened, the fact of the matter is, we've received a notice of violation. It happened on July 4th. I mean, our chemical entered the creek, so it's obviously our responsibility, but we just would like to know how they came up with that. And I know they gave us a real good explanation with the notice of violation of how they determined it and how they determined the number of fish, but that's the other thing. It's 300 and some fish, but we're being charged for, over 5,000 dead fish or something like that. Certainly not trying to argue with DEQ, we just would like a little further explanation, that's all. Anyhow, so with that, we wanted to make sure the board is aware of a notice of violation that we received, that we have taken some action steps. We're involved in communication with DEQ. I'm sure there's going to be further information forthcoming on this.
So right now, we're going to be billed $2,851.80.
Plus the costs of additional $5,478 or something like that for the dead fish.
Is that dollar amount in here?
Yes. Yes.
So what is the total?
You're asking me to do math in my head. So,
Ballpark.
What species will they be stocking? Are you aware of the species?
yeah, actually in the report, there's a table, and if you refer to actually page 92 in our agenda, the list of fish species observed in the fish kill are listed.
Okay.
And there's quite a few of those. And they also have photos.
$5,478.
And one of the things they do explain in here is that they feel like there was probably potentially more fish to be found when there was a thunderstorm that came up when they were walking the creek, and they had to stop doing the search. And so likely some of the floating fish may have just float on down river to James River. We certainly aren't taking light of this. And, as a water authority, we certainly hate that this happened.
Mr. Hall, I'm sorry, I was distracted by something. Did I hear you say that you had secondary containment on the tanks now?
We have a tank that's, I have a photo.
The totes, right?
Yeah, that I didn't put it in the agenda. Can I share this? It is it's a tank it's right in between both of our day tanks.
There are aftermarket devices that you can place tanks like this on that will serve as a containment vessel that you may want to consider.
Yes.
That's what I thought you said you were going to do, was put in a containment system with an alarm. Or have you attempted to do that?
No, we've discussed that. What he's talking about, these date tanks that big around, is two of those. It would be a big square containment, sized appropriately. Maybe it's like a third of the capacity or something like that we could put a float in. We have not entertained that option in this. This was a quick fix that actually I think the operators came up with, putting an overflow tank beside of it. But duly noted, I agree with what you're saying. There is a floor drain there, and the floor drain actually is part of a connection of other floor drains in the water plant that flows water all the time.
Yeah, you should not have a floor drain go into daylight in a chemical room as a matter of just good practice. But I understand this water plant predates some of those practices, so.
Okay.
So, I guess what I'm hearing is, it happened, it was an unfortunate event. The Service Authority is going to be fined. That dollar amount is
Well, there's
whatever it is.
I'm sorry, but there's other things with that. In my experience with DEQ, it's, they want to know how we address the situation right up front.
I'm getting to that.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay. So, you've done some things to address it, right?
Mhm.
I think what's fairly debatable right now is what we're going to do to prevent it from happening again.
Mhm.
So if there needs to be more investment to prevent the chemicals from getting in the floor drain again, I think that's what at least I'm interested in hearing about,
Okay.
all right?
Yep.
Is there,
No, we need secondary containment as a plan.
right, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, operational alarms are great, but you need secondary containment. And it's typically to take the full volume of the tank.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. The other part of that, I was saying with DEQ, in my experience, is not only what do we do and what have we done to prevent it, and then what's our follow-up?
Okay. All right, anything else?
No, I don't have anything else.
Great. All right, are there any citizen comments? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Calvin Kennan, District 3. Just want to say thank you guys for continuing your work to get those availability fees in line and get us competitive. I talked about that a couple meetings ago, and, you guys are putting us in the ballgame economically. It'll be fascinating to see what happens as you get more availability fees down the road. In other words, it's hard to quantify how many we've missed on where people just said, I'm not paying that, and I'm going to go up the road. So you guys are inching toward the finish line on that and done a lot of work, I know, on your own even, and appreciate that as citizens. Thank y'all. Also on the Winesap Road thing, I live on Winesap Road, so I'm at 1805, and there's a property right beside me, and I think the Monicans own that, and it goes back toward yours, back toward Wesley, back toward you all. And then, of course, Mr. Sly's in that straight shot, and so I'm pretty sure I'm probably less than a mile from yours. So if you guys need to park there or look at that, or if you're checking that property, you're welcome, to come by, and you can use my property or turn around or however you want to do it. And as a Winesap Road citizen, I would love to have water. I know sewer's not coming, but water, yes. Thank you.
Okay, any matters from the board?
I've got one, I meant to bring it up earlier. Would you mind touching base with Mr. Hopkins and make sure he is on track to report out or bring to us whatever he plans to as far as the water assistance program next month? Make sure that's on the agenda there.
Nothing.
Mr. Farrow?
Already covered them. Thanks.
Mr. Pugh?
Have nothing.
I have nothing. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned.
Thank you, sir.